The backstories, the woman that came before. Many years on from Katia and Elena, we come to Carla, a Spanish singer from Madrid. Carla, she's a bohemian type, she's a free spirit, she's an artist, and she travels around Europe with her music, and her work takes her to Poland. Now, in Poland, Carla is bitten by a she-wolf and becomes her apprentice. They only have a few weeks together before Carla's maker is killed by some gangsters, and Carla transforms in her flat and obviously knows that something has happened to her maker, because, as I said before, if something happens to your maker and they die, the changes in the apprentice are instantaneous. Like the transformation is instantaneous. And in our short film, Lucille's transformation is nothing like what that transformation would be like the first time you transform. Partly this was because of budgetary reasons that I decided this, but yeah, also because with Lucille, you know, she'd been doing it for you know, a few years by that point, and you know, and in my mind, actually, the levels of transformation in her would vary actually entirely. Like how she comes out and what she looks like would sort of actually vary entirely with who she was having sex with, which is when the transformation happens, when she's having sex. To go back to the curse, Elena and Hugo. And so, yeah, the extent of how she comes out and all of that, that would all change and be varied depending on, you know, who she was with. So, for example, at the start of the film, we see Amy take somebody back who's not a very nice man, the kind of man that Lucille likes to eat and prey on, because she doesn't feel so bad about it afterwards. Because another part of the curse is that for a split second after the glory moment, basically there's literally like a few seconds afterwards, and this is just shows you how sick and cruel Katia was, that she would do this. But for a few seconds afterwards, she would allow the she-wolf to be back to the person that she originally was before she became the she-wolf. Because once she's the she-wolf, she's kind of, you know, in another place. She's walking about like a human and stuff, but she's not. You know, she's something really from some, you know, somewhere dark and not nice. And so, in Katia's mind, to make them become themselves just for a few seconds after the sex, you know, depending on the person as well, who's the she-wolf, but it's like the first thing that you see after you orgasm, this just sounds so weird, but is your victim, you know, with a complete clarity, you know, of mind and heart, and it's also almost like because what she wanted Elena to do was, through the process of you know, of the act of having sex, and that's how, you know, the she-wolf kills her prey, that through that act. I mean, I don't even go into too much about how that happens, but how that happens is basically I'll go into that later because it's quite lengthy, but you know, she kind of looks down and sort of goes, oh God, I did that, like I just killed that man, and you know, and then the venom starts to pump pump round again and all that. And she doesn't really care. She's just starving. She's just absolutely starving afterwards, and just can't wait to, you know, to eat it. And I think in the earlier days, you know, they would just like tear right in. But, you know, as they became more sort of civilized, and they sort of get the apprentice to kind of like clean the body up and sort of chop it up into nice bits, stick it in the freezer, and then, you know, you can start to kind of stockpile your food as well that way, for the winter. And, you know, maybe you can take a full moon night off if you've got plenty in the freezer, you know. So they kind of like developed it over time. I've totally lost my train of thought now, but yeah. So anyway, yeah, I was talking about transformations, right? So, Carla, do you remember Carla? Carla, Carla, the Spanish singer from Madrid who went to Poland and was bitten, right, by a she-wolf there, starts to transform in her flat because she knows something's happened to her maker. So later that night, Carla goes to a jazz bar for a drink, and she's tired, she's upset, obviously, she knows something's happened, she doesn't know what, but she knows, you know, once that connection's gone, once, you know, that she-wolf is dead, if there's any way that they can, like, bury them or whatever, they will do that. Get rid of the body, they will do that. But, you know, Carla didn't know where her maker was. She didn't know what had happened to her. And she knew she just wouldn't find out. She just had a sense, like a sixth sense, that she wouldn't find out. So she's like, right, I just need to get on it. I just need to find an apprentice. So she goes to this bar. At the bar is Polish business executive Ivana, a beautiful woman sitting alone with a glass of bourbon. Now this is quite interesting because I like the idea of, like, Carla and Ivana's relationship is a wonderful story, and what we've basically tried to do with the music in She-Wolf is bring Spanish guitars from Carla's world, and then Ivana's love of jazz and bourbon into, you know, the world that we're visiting, because Ivana is then Lucille's old partner, and a lot of the traits and things that Ivana learnt while she was with Carla, you know, they can obviously, some of them transcend through to Lucille, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So Carla and Ivana hit it off, and Carla makes Ivana her apprentice. The two women live a full and meat-filled life together in Krakow, and Carla is about to reach her natural end as a she-wolf. So that means that since coming together, they had a really good run, a good decade together, just running about, having fun, playing jazz, drinking bourbon, eating flesh of men, all in Krakow, good times. Carla obviously knows her time's coming up, and she tells Ivana that she's always wanted to be buried up in the Shetland Isles of Scotland, and would Ivana take her there, because at this point Carla's very sick. So Ivana complies, obviously, she'd do anything for Carla, and the two make the journey from Krakow to the Shetlands. Carla becomes increasingly weak, and, you know, she's dying, and I think this last journey together, I could see it sort of playing out in my head as they're taking the ferry and all that kind of stuff, and then Ivana burying Carla in a cave on the beach, you know, mourning her. Like, I could picture it all, and I could see it as actually quite a touching and quite a sad sort of moment, because even though all of this is not something that they asked for and not something real, it's something still very real for them, and it's, you know, it's such an intense bond, and it's, you know, you can almost connect with it in the way that, you know, how would you feel if you lost somebody that you really loved, you know, that kind of thing. So there on the beach with the blackness and the waves crashing and all that, Ivana transforms immediately and goes on her way. That night, after she's obviously transformed back, after that first painful transformation, she transforms back to her human self and then makes her way to Oban. In Oban, she goes into a small old man pub for a drink and orders a bourbon on ice. At the bar is a young, gorgeous innkeeper's daughter called Lucille. And from the very, very start, the image of Lucille was always based on Willow from the Wicker Man. And yeah, Britt Ekland all the way, just because stylistically as well, I wanted to bring, well, I'm going to go off on a tangent again about the story, but for the themes of the story and stuff, I really wanted a real sort of 60s, 70s vibe, those kind of like blonde bombshell type things, because of the sort of the exploitation type nature of it as well. I thought it tied in quite nice. Anyway, so that's Lucille. Ivana goes back to the bar the next night, and soon Lucille is mesmerised by Ivana, but she doesn't really know why. But it's this beautiful sort of intelligent Polish exec. There's something a bit mysterious about her, and she loves bourbon, and she's coming into this bar in Oban with all these like old men, and she's like, what's going on? That's the most exciting sort of person that's walked in there her whole life. And Ivana takes Lucille out for a walk the next night after that, and Lucille gets bit down by the harbour somewhere and becomes Ivana's apprentice. So the two decide to go to the village of Dalavich, and that's where they buy a cabin, because obviously, you know, killing men and eating their flesh is something you probably need to be quite careful about, that you don't, you know, I mean, I think Ivana at one point did consider maybe moving to a larger city to do it, because in Krakow they could sort of get away with that quite a lot, you know, down little lanes and things. But actually Ivana thought, you know, well, with Lucille's local knowledge of the place, and with Dalavich being such a remote village, and with lots of hill walkers and lots of people coming in the summer, and, you know, lots of people getting lost in the winter, and this, that and the other, she thought that's actually, we could probably get away with this, and it's a nice change of scenery for her as well. So, you know, another thing that Lucille is privy to is information on all the really not so nice men who probably terrorised her as a young woman. You know, the drunks, the aggressive ones that used to come into the bar, the ones who, you know, beat up her cousin, and, you know, just all these kind of lousy sort of guys that will just pretend exist there in Oban. And which I've met a lot of people in Oban, they're lovely, not judging, but you know the types of people, you know, the kinds of people. And so she's like, well, why don't we let's get rid of them first, because you know what, the place would be much nicer without them, and I would just feel better about it, you know, and all this sort of stuff. So while she's still an apprentice, Lucille manages to sort of talk Ivana into going down this line of killing, and, you know, Ivana's up for it. She's like, yeah, of course, yeah, whatever. And